truth behind Canada's collapsing economy. What if I told you that the Canadian economy isn't as strong as people think, and we're from just one little blip from having a major crisis here in Canada? In today's video, I'm going to be doing a deep dive into the Canadian economy and what all our weak points are here in Canada. I'm also going to be uncovering a lot of the mistakes that Justin Trudeau's government's been making. It seems that they're almost self-sabotaging the Canadian economy and limiting the potential future that Canadians can have. So let's break down the areas where Canada is lacking behind other countries. And in this video, I'm going to be primarily reflecting on and comparing us to the US. Have you ever wondered how we stack up to the economic giant of the world? The beautiful US of A. Certainly their economy seems to be absolutely bulletproof. Even though in 2008 they had a major financial crash, they seem to consistently be resilient and still are the world dominant power when it comes to economy. In order to do these comparisons, I'll be breaking down on the amount of population that we have in Canada compared to the US, and just how our economies are mismatched and why ultimately they are superior, and how the policies that Justin Trudeau are actually implementing in Canada are doing more harm than good. Despite the population of Canada being only 1/8 the size of US, our GDP is not scaling the same ratio. America's GDP is $24.8 trillion annually. Canada produces a mere $2.2 trillion. Right now, our GDP is 11.2 times the less of America. If you're someone that's finding my content valuable and it's helping you stay up to date with exactly what's going on, then you're going to want to smash the subscribe button. It means the world to my channel and it really helps me out. But where does Canada actually fall short? We have this disparity between GDP and population, but what are the problems that the Canadian economy seems to continue to face that we aren't able to overcome? It starts with our gross national income and the amount that we have to export in order to produce money here in Canada. Canada necessarily is just playing catch up, where 7/8 of everything that we produce in Canada has to get exported. This makes us completely reliant on international affairs in order for our economy to keep producing. But why is that? Why does Canada seem to be having to rely so heavily on having to export? So if you were to reflect on, say, America again, they consume 2/3 of all the products that they produce in their country. So they're pretty much self-sufficient. With us having to export 7/8 everything we produce here in Canada just has us leaving behind. So then the Canadian government, their biggest policies that they're implementing is a ton of immigration. So just over last year, we saw 1 million immigrants come into Canada, which I am a firm believer that having more immigration and having a larger population size is going to help cause our economy to start being more self-sufficient so we can consume more of those products in-house. But where Justin Trudeau was massively short-sighted was now he's caused a huge inflation bubble and a massive shortage of housing. With not implementing the right fiscal policies to keep up with the immigration demand, now every Canadian is having to suffer with the lack of housing that is available. To put this in perspective, out of any non-third world country has the least amount of housing available on a population size. For every 1,000 people, we have 427 homes. Where if you compare that to the United States, they're in the high 600 range. On for every 1,000 people that there's 600 and above homes available. This has just led to us seeing an absolute increase in housing prices because of the supply and demand factor. But not only has the Canadian government really gone wrong with housing, it's also lack of support in terms of entrepreneurship and recent development is the second worst out of all the G7 countries. We put the least amount of capital towards research and development, which is going to be the main reason why our economy actually expands, is entering into new markets, expanding on the ones that we're already in, and becoming more self-sufficient. Where this lack of spending really hurts people is now starting some of these companies as an entrepreneur is extremely difficult. That's why everyone almost migrates south of the border if they have really aspirations to start something big. The next point where Canada could have had massive success in is the green wave. Renewable energy is the big craze right now in the economy, where a lot of these companies are getting a ton of funding. If you're going to compare what was going down in the US with the Inflation Reduction Act that Joe Biden put in place, this funding and granting is having these companies make massive leaps in the efficiency legs on finding renewable energy sources to preserve our countries and our climates. No one can argue now that climate change is definitely upon us. I know just where I live, the amount of forest fires and seeing the destruction on how it's impacting and just how much hotter everything is getting, you cannot deny that climate change is around. Already having such a big footprint in the energy space, it would have been an easy segue for a lot of these companies if they got some funding from the Canadian government to start doing more research and developing in these renewable energy sources on how we can expand our economy. We could have been on the forefront of developing these technologies because we have so many different companies doing this, say like carbon capture and stuff. We would have been able to implement some of these things at the facilities and the plants that drive our Canadian economy and been battle testing exactly what's working and what's not, and then take that technology and pass it off into other countries, where now the lack of spending, all these other countries are well ahead, even though it was right there at our fingertips that we could have took advantage of. So the way forward, what needs to happen? First and foremost, I believe that the Justin Trudeau government needs to get absolutely abolished and kicked out of Parliament. They have been just depleting our country over and over, and seems to be more worried about all these foreign aid missions and looking good in the press than actually doing what we need here on our home soil to get back to becoming one of the mega drivers of the world economy. I'd say step number one, it definitely starts with us revamping our physical policy, putting more spending towards research and development and entrepreneurship, entering into some of these renewable energy markets just in their infancy of getting started out, and trying to become one of the forefront leaders in a certain space. The next but most important is we need to get inflation down. Our dollar is getting absolutely hammered and absolutely depleting comparing it to every other currency in the world. And the next and most important step is going to be getting the lack of housing supply in Canada under control. This is going to take some massive spending from the Canadian government in order to keep up with the demand of housing. We are so far behind, it almost seems like there's nothing that the government can possibly do, but I know if someone else other than Justin Trudeau got into power, that they would be able to figure something out that could potentially help Canadians here.